Hi, everybody. I'm Marshall.
And I'm John.
And I'm Allie.
And today we're going to be talking about the local and Indigenous stakeholders in the Thompson-Okanagan region in British Columbia, and then apply that to Durango, Colorado.
Hi, everyone. So this is the overview of our presentation. We're going to begin by introducing our topic and explaining our thesis. We'll then go into talking about our best practice, the Thompson-Okanagan region, and its WTTC award. We will then talk about the importance of local stakeholder and Indigenous community involvement in tourism planning in general as a whole. And then we will dive deeper into the specifics of local stakeholder and Indigenous stakeholders within Durango, Colorado, and the Thompson-Okanagan region. We will end our presentation with some recommendations and our discussion questions.
So our thesis for this project is that using a critical application of the WTTC, or World Travel and Tourism Council, award-winning Thompson-Okanagan tourism plan that focused on sustainability and forming working partnerships with the local Indigenous stakeholders. This can then be directly applied towards Durango, Colorado, and how the city can involve the surrounding locals and Indigenous communities, the Southern Ute Tribe.
Here is a brief video about the Thompson-Okanagan Tourism Association and their tourism strategy that they created for the region.
The Thompson-Okanagan region is 71,000 square kilometers in size, stretching from the 49th parallel to Mount Robson, the highest mountain in the Canadian Rockies, including 90 communities and 33 First Nation communities. Our region is home to dramatic mountains and desert hills, walkable cities and friendly towns, sparkling lakes, and hundreds of wineries. In 2017, the region attracted more than 4.5 million visitors who contributed over $2.2 billion to the local economy. While tourism brings many economic benefits, over-tourism can damage our environment, strain our infrastructure, and leave residents feeling crowded and concerned. To prevent over-tourism, the Thompson-Okanagan Tourism Association worked with communities in the region to develop a 10-year regional tourism strategy called Embracing Our Potential. The strategy took 18 months to create and included feedback from over 1,800 industry operators. Embracing Our Potential is founded on responsible and sustainable tourism approach, which preserves the history, culture, and lands of the people who call our region home. Using big data and the latest in technology, we coordinate marketing and economic activities to influence the flow of tourists through the region. This connects visitors to the right experiences at the right time, minimizing negative impacts. We've also worked with and support local businesses to adopt sustainable practices. Last year, the region was the first in the Americas to be identified as a biosphere certified destination. Through this project, we've boosted the reputation of the Thompson-Okanagan region, encouraged year-round visits, increased the number of tourism revenue generating days, and ensured that the tourism benefits are shared between all communities.
A little bit about the Thompson-Okanagan region. So as you can see on the screen, this is a map of British Columbia, Canada, and that yellow region there towards the bottom is the Thompson-Okanagan region of BC. To talk more on what the video touched on, which was the tourism strategy that the Thompson-Okanagan Tourism Association made back in 2012 called Embracing Our Potential. It is a 10-year tourism strategy spanning from the years 2012 to 2022. And within this strategy, they worked with industry stakeholders, government organizations, and community partners to really create a plan to foster sustainable tourism in a way that benefits all. And so how they did this is they made a singular goal, and their goal is to create a more sustainable year-round tourism industry that will lead to a 3% increase in revenue every year over the 10-year span. And in order to achieve that goal, they then created 3 main objectives, as seen on the screen. And our topic, local stakeholders and Indigenous community involvement, really falls into the first and the third objective there, maximizing the value of tourism to the regional economy and maximizing the spread of benefits of tourism around the region, as the local stakeholders and the Indigenous communities, they need to maximize the value of tourism for themselves and for those visiting, and also they need to get the benefits as well that tourism can bring about in the region. Within these 3 main objectives, there are 5 themes that the tourism strategy focuses on, and they are as follows: identifying the iconic, enriching local flavors, revealing the story, expanding personal horizons, and building authenticity. And to address these 5 themes, they then created 7 priorities. And of the 7 priorities, there are 4 that relate back to our topic the most. And those 4 are working in partnership, developing vertical integration, promoting horizontal integration, and then respecting and recognizing diverse cultures. And local stakeholders and Indigenous communities really fall into those 4, as that's how you would integrate them into a tourism strategy and make sure that they are involved in the process. And essentially this plan was a huge deal in making public-private effort to encourage sustainable tourism in the area. And they've done this through steering committees, action groups, working with the community in subregions, and then also TOTA has really worked to implement and be the person, the group coordinating all of these efforts to ensure that they're reaching their benchmark each year so that they're on track for the 10-year plan. The WTTC, also known as the World Travel and Tourism Council, was the organization that awarded this plan. The Thompson Okanagan Tourism Association received the Tourism for Tomorrow Destination Award back in 2018. And this is such a huge deal to receive this award from the WTTC because they are a nonprofit out of London, and their mission is to ensure that the tourism sector is seamless, secure, safe, inclusive, and sustainable. And so by receiving this award, it just goes to show that the Thompson Okanagan region has met their mission. And that's a big deal within the tourism industry. In addition to that, the WTTC also raises awareness of the value of travel and tourism, not just economically, but also just the experience of it and the importance of other sectors of tourism that don't just relate to the economic benefits. And this award means a lot to the Thompson Okanagan Tourism Association, as it just makes it a huge example for the industry and other industry leaders. It's an award to base other areas off of when choosing to plan for tourism. All right, next I'm going to talk about the local stakeholders and Indigenous communities in tourism planning, just in general. It's a topic that we've discussed a lot throughout the semester, and what we found from our research is that it is incredibly critical in creating a tourism framework that benefits all. You need to have local stakeholders and the Indigenous communities involved in the process. And plus, if everyone's there working together, it's easier to reach a common goal and have a common goal to work towards. A huge thing with involving local stakeholders and Indigenous communities is the distribution of power. There are a lot of tourism sectors and industries out there that hold a lot of power, and the local stakeholders and Indigenous communities that rely on that industry don't, and that can cause a lot of issues and a lot of rifts. However, if you do involve the local stakeholders and Indigenous communities in the tourism industry, in their plans and just their decisions, that power can be distributed more equally, and local stakeholders and Indigenous communities can feel more involved and like they have control and a say in what happens to an area that they love and care about. In addition to all of that, by incorporating these communities early on in the process, you can address issues before they snowball and become a huge problem that seems to have no solution. And that's just a huge thing in involving these local stakeholders and Indigenous communities, is by talking to them, you can get a better idea of what their perspective is on everything, and therefore have a better idea on how to approach the situation in a way that fits their needs and just fits the community. we found that local stakeholder Indigenous community involvement fits with SDG goals number 8 and 11, and those are decent work and economic growth and then sustainable cities and communities. And these two goals can't be accomplished without the involvement of local stakeholders and the Indigenous communities. Some ways that we found were effective in incorporating these actors in tourism planning was through interviews, public forums, community events, creating a sense of place, and bottom-up integration. These are all great ways to distribute that power more equally amongst all, and also just make tourism more sustainable in general.
Firstly, we'll be taking a look at Durango as a whole through this video.
Durango is a quaint yet modern mountain town, 6,500 feet above sea level, surrounded by the San Juan National Forest, a hop, skip, and a jump away from Mesa Verde National Park, and a short drive to Four Corners, the only place in the United States where the 4 states of Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah all meet. We're going to take you on a journey back in time, on a steam-powered locomotive, and even to new heights, zip-lining among the trees, as Durango is one of the most exciting places for outdoor adventures and breathtaking views. Located in the southwest corner of the state of Colorado is the beautiful and historic town of Durango, surrounded by over 2 million acres of aspen groves, pine trees, mountain peaks, and alpine lakes. This is the one-time home of ancient cliff dwellers, Spanish explorers, trappers, and traders. Grab your outdoor gear because we're going to explore some of the sights and sounds that have made this town famous. From a time when mining was king, railroads were expanding their influence, up to present day, where you can experience outdoor adventure, sample some locally made brews, and enjoy some truly spectacular scenery, all of which are uniquely Durango. No matter what time of year you visit, you can get a true taste of southwestern Colorado. Durango attracts many different types of vacationers and travelers, from weekend warriors who like to hike and rock climb, to city folk who take in museums and eat gourmet Western-style dinners. We will take you aboard the historic Durango and Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad, whisk you to new heights, tree-to-tree ziplining, and to snow-shredding purgatory at Durango Mountain Resort.
From this video, one can see that the local stakeholders in Durango, Colorado is affiliated with tourism planning and sustainable development. With this in mind, Durango does a good job involving the local community within tourism planning. This is seen throughout their master plan as well as the developments brought from tourism. Notably, culture, arts, local businesses, and the environmental heritage are not only preserved, but grow in terms of sustainable infrastructure. From this, one can look at Durango and see that through tourism planning, they do a good job including the community not only in the economic benefits, but the social, institutional, and environmental aspects as well. From hosting community meetings to gaining insights on the previously listed factors or promoting local businesses, Durango focuses on communal engagement. Further, Durango includes sociocultural factors such as art, dancing, within community events to preserve local culture and promote SDG number 11. From this, by collaborating with the local community, Durango is able to preserve local culture through the economic development of arts, nature, and local businesses. With this in mind, Durango extends the involvement of the local community and acts on behalf of them to preserve the local culture offered by the insights given from the community. From this, Durango not only incorporates the local community's sense of place within their master plan, but markets this sense of place, which creates a sustainable stakeholder redistribution, which thus implements SDG number 8. While looking at the Durango plan provided in 2006, which is now extended to 2040, there are sections regarding the vision established by the involvement of multiple stakeholders. These sections regard the community development and environmental element, as well as an arts, culture, and economic elements as well. From this, Durango then redistributes the positive economic impact of tourism back to the community for sustainable development in both local and environmental infrastructure. Notably, through the source of the community's primary asset, the natural environment, Durango aims to push even further and enhance the surrounding environment when developing near an environmental setting. For example, streams, rivers, wildlife, etc. Notably seen in Durango's plan, they lack the presence of engaging within the Indigenous community in terms of planning and development. Furthermore, this lack of engagement reduces the transparency and communication between the respective tourism associations and do not allow for the redistribution of cross-tourism benefits. For example, the city of Durango markets the Museum of the Southern Ute Tribe, but fails to engage in the events and culture and environmental heritage offered by them. Concerning this, Durango is lacking a large part of the local community involvement regarding the Indigenous community. Moreover, when looking at the sense of place of Durango and their master plan, they strive to create one through their local stakeholders. From this, Durango uses the community networks to join forces with sustainable tourism development by appealing to tourists in the want of experiencing local authenticity. According to the city of Durango, not only are they focusing on establishing a culinary place, but to sustainably plan land as well as retain local sense of identity. Speaking on this, Durango not only wants to establish a sense of place through food, using local businesses, but they would like to sustainably develop the surrounding land without taking away from the local community. Overall, when considering the tourism planning and establishing a sense of place, one can see they almost go hand in hand. Speaking on this, tourism planning is not only the process of sustainable development, but the implication of the community and all of its aspects, which ultimately establish the sense of place. The sense of place is not only attributed to the local community, but the surrounding environment, culture, and food as well. With all of this in mind, Durango thus again fails to incorporate the Indigenous community, this time in terms of sense of place. From this, the city of Durango is not only missing a large part of the environmental and economic heritage, but they are missing out on multi-benefiting relationships. With this being said, the Southern Ute tribe holds sense of place in high regards in terms of culture and can benefit from the tourism development. Moreover, Durango will then be able to communicate, and incorporate the Southern Ute tribe's culture into the community's sense of place.
So moving forward, we're next going to be discussing the Indigenous stakeholders in the Thompson Okanagan region. So to preface this section, a lot of the names of these Indigenous communities I have only read on paper and haven't actually heard them spoken, so I will probably be mispronouncing at least a few of them, so my apologies. But anyway, so in the greater British Columbia area, there are over 200 Indigenous tribes. A few examples of some of the tribes in the area are on the left side of the screen. We have a picture of some of the Shuswap chiefs from 1867. In contrast to on the right side of the screen, we have some Silks tribe members who are actually students at the University of British Columbia, and they're holding the Silks Nation flag. And then down at the bottom of the screen, we have the Nakapamuks Nation logo. So in the area, TOTA is partnered with 33 Indigenous communities and helps them to market their tourism products. So some of the tourism products that have proven to be quite popular in the area are things to do with the traditional cooking methods and the traditional cuisine. And this includes not only classes on how to do these traditional cooking methods, such as baking in a clay oven or grinding various grains between stones, but also they have restaurants where people can go and just sample the cuisine if they're not actually interested in learning to cook it. As well, some other activities that prove popular is the passing on of local legends and traditions, sacred, like the showing off of sacred places, and then traditional cultural ceremonies. And all of these help to kind of build the sense of place that leads to making this, the Thompson Okanagan region, into the authentic traditional Indigenous tourism experience that a lot of people seek out when they're visiting this area. So a good example of the partnership between TOTA and some of these Indigenous communities is right here. We have a video that is showing the Nikmeep Desert Cultural Center, which is run by the Silks Nation.
With each story that we tell, it teaches. And so as we take people on cultural tours, we're teaching. When they walk on the paths of the Inkimi Desert Cultural Center, I want them to realize that this is a special place, that history happened here, that it's a beautiful history. Our people built homes and dwelled on these beautiful lands. The land took care of us. The animals took care of us. And so we just want to share why we love our area. And we want people from all over the world to come visit us because we have a lot to share.
So next, we will be discussing our Indigenous stakeholders in Durango, Colorado, the Southern Ute Tribe. So here we have some pictures of the Southern Ute Tribe. On the left side of the screen, you can see this is a picture of some of the Southern Ute chiefs from the late 1800s. And then to contrast that, we have a modern day picture on the right side of the screen of a recent tribal fair and powwow that the Ute Tribe put on. So just to kind of give you an idea of where the Southern Ute Reservation is located, you can see on this map here that the red section is where the Southern Ute Reservation is, and it's just south of Durango. To give you a little bit more context, this map shows you where the Southern Ute Reservation is, the orange area, in relation to the Four Corners area and the greater Mesa Verde region as a whole. So a quick history of the Southern Ute people is the Southern Ute Tribe has resided in Colorado since the beginning of time according to their tribal history, which has been both written and spoken orally and goes back to at least 8,000 years. So historically, the range of the Southern Ute Tribe was originally much larger than Colorado and incorporated parts of Kansas, Wyoming, Utah, New Mexico, and Arizona, as you can see in the picture. But today, this has been fragmented, and there are much smaller bands of Ute Tribe members who inhabit reservations that are scattered throughout this region.
The implementation of the Thompson Okanagan Tourism Association to Durango is as follows. So with the use of bottom-up integration, as seen with TOTA and their tourism strategy within the Thompson Okanagan region, we can then apply that to Durango, Colorado and the Southern Ute Tribe. And by incorporating bottom-up integration, Durango, Colorado and the Southern Ute Tribe will be able to benefit more from tourism in that area. In addition to that, Durango does lack Indigenous involvement within their tourism strategy, as Marshall discussed earlier in our presentation. However, in order to fix this, and there are ways to fix it, if they were to look a little bit more closely at communicating with the Indigenous cultures and really putting in that effort to forge a relationship with them through communication and creating a sense of place, they'll better be able to incorporate and involve the Indigenous community into tourism development.
So our first recommendation for Durango is to create a bottom-up integration approach with the Ute Tribe. This could take the form of community meetings or events.
The second one would be for Durango should be working on implementing the Indigenous community within a larger sense of place to give the locals and Indigenous peoples an identity to share, which gives visitors more of a reason to want to come visit Durango. From that, it kind of gives the Southern Ute Tribe culture into the Durango sense of place, and it kind of meshes the two.
In addition to that, our third recommendation is including the Indigenous community into the already existing local framework of planning and sustainable development, including economic, social, and environmental factors that would result in a larger preservation of cultural heritage. To sum up everything we've discussed so far in our presentation, Durango has been successful in incorporating local stakeholders within tourism development in the area. However, they do have work to do when it comes to incorporating the Indigenous communities.
As seen in TOTA, they provide a good example of what local and Indigenous stakeholders' relationships should look like in terms of sense of place. And from that, we can pull from that and apply it to Durango.
So since we have seen that stakeholder integration is incredibly important in Indigenous tourism endeavors, we want to apply we think it would be beneficial if Durango applied the TOTA credentials have been applied in the Thompson Okanagan region by developing bottom-up integration, recognizing and respecting local cultures, and including the Indigenous peoples in the tourism planning and development in their region.
All right, so for our discussion questions, we set this up a little bit differently than other groups have so far. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through our questions, and then we were gonna have a little discussion of our own between the three of us so that we could feel included in the discussion that you guys will be having based on these questions once you watch our video.
So starting off, so the first discussion question is, how can increased local community engagement and implementation of Indigenous stakeholders benefit Durango in terms of sustainable tourism development? So my response is, increased local community engagement and implementation of Indigenous stakeholders is key to the long-term success of any Indigenous tourism programs. The community must gain some economic benefit in order to encourage the continued involvement of the locals. This also leads to an authentic experience, which is what will draw visitors to the destination in the first place.
I think that is really accurate. Without the engagement from the community and Indigenous stakeholders, it's hard to work towards a sustainable end together, for sure.
Well, there'd be no reason that people would want to visit the,
Exactly.
the area in the
Adds,
first place without it.
To the uniqueness of it all, for sure.
I'm going to chime in here a little bit and be the devil's advocate. And through that, my question number 2, it's talking about a negative impact or negative or positive impact on culture. And through the longevity of tourism and talking about the long-term plan, for example, when looking at the Mercy tribe in Ethiopia, they're creating fake ceremonies, fake cultural items for tourists to come in and take pictures for long-term economic success. And in my mind, that's creating a very negative impact on culture, because it's almost creating a fake culture for tourists rather than promoting their Indigenous selves and their cultural heritage to the fullest extent, rather than manipulating it for economic development. But please chime in if you think something else.
Well, at the same time, because you're saying that these experiences aren't authentic because they just made them up for the benefit of the tourists. But if it's the actual Indigenous tribes of people who are creating these experiences, wouldn't they be authentic? It's like, how old do they have to be before they're considered authentic?
Well, I might have a little more background on the Mercy tribe than what I'm leading on to be because of my recent involvement with Stuart Cottrell's class. But what they are making ceremonial headdresses that they themselves have come out and said they have nothing to do with their tribe. It is completely fake. They're just like, oh, tourists like to see us dressed up like this. And I'm not trying to bash your reply, because that's a great insight, is because they're making this, shouldn't that be implemented into their culture? Now, looking at this from your side, that's their tourist culture, is they have their own personal culture that they want to preserve and keep to themselves, and then expose a tourist culture, which in my mind is a positive thing for economic benefit.
Well, at the same time, I don't have a source off the top of my head for this, but we've discussed people in past classes where it was they were saying that like modern day people didn't really do a lot of these cultural practices in the first place, and so they were really kind of being brought back because of the tourism in the community. And so it was, so it's kind of in a way that kind of brought back a lot of those cultural aspects to the people who they originally belonged to. So in that case, it's like, do these people really have like a really like a close connection to these things in the first place, or would they more fall into like the different practices that are made up exclusively for tourism?
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, what you guys are discussing is essentially the whole issue with stage authenticity. People are adapting to tourism, and it's hard because it may not have been a part of their culture, but because they now are incorporating it, you could argue that maybe their culture is adapting But then there's that argument too that is it adapting in the best ways? Obviously, tourism and economic gain isn't the best driving force.
I mean, in consideration, maybe it's not, you know.
Right. All right, moving on to our last question. What do you think would be an effective way to incorporate local stakeholders and Indigenous communities in Fort Collins tourism planning? So as we've discussed a lot throughout the semester, is that tourism planning is kind of an essential thing at this point in time anywhere. You need it in order to create sustainable tourism in an area, Fort Collins included. And what I thought would be a good way to incorporate local stakeholders and the Indigenous communities here in Fort Collins would be to really work on community events. Throwing community events and working on those private-public partnerships as well would be super key in just getting people kind of involved and making sure that a theme of community events or public forums is tourism and tourism planning and what people want to see in the future.
No, I mean, that's exactly what tourism planning is. It's implementing the community and getting their insight on what they want in their community and what they want to get out of tourism.
Yeah, and I think adding on to that would definitely, because I mean, it's well known that Fort Collins doesn't have a tourism plan in place. So I think it would be good to kind of incorporate a tourism plan that has these aspects to it going forward.
You know, even from there, like we've talked about in class, including the university tourist, as in the families, the relatives of the students, or the friends of the students, those are tourists themselves. It's not anything that's different than, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. All right. So those are our 3 discussion questions. I hope you guys enjoyed our little discussion, and we just want to thank you for listening to our presentation and tuning in. We hope that everyone is staying safe and healthy out there and isn't going too stir crazy. And hopefully we'll see you in our last Zoom meeting here at the end of the semester. And then
Thank
just real
you
quick
all.
to hear our
Yeah,
references.
thank you all for listening.